I've always wanted to tell this story. This is a story about a family whose father accepted a position overseas. The country was Brazil. It was the year 1962. The story is told from two perspectives. My perspective as a 10-year-old kid leaving the security and the normalcy of a small town south of Cleveland to not only another country, but a country 5,000 miles away. Part 1 is from my perspective. Part 2 begins with my father's perspective. His perspective is taken from monthly articles he writes in the Cleveland chapter of the American Society of Tool and Manufacturing Engineers called The Tool Post. As I said, I was 10 years old when my father accepted a teaching position at the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. I was told the position would last 2 years. It was a contract position with USAID. There was no stay-home option. My acceptance or approval was irrelevant. It was late June 1962 when we left home. My older married sister stayed in our home in our absence. Our family of 4, both parents, my brother and I, traveled to New Orleans in our new 62 Biscayne. We stayed in a motel until it was time to depart. We drove the Chevy dockside. The Chevy was loaded into the ship's hold for the duration of the voyage. We were about to embark on a ship called the Del Norte. I can't say I was happy. I loved my home, my street, my school, and friends. It was in the middle of summer. I'm sure my friends at home were playing baseball, maybe messing around in the woods, sleeping in, or doing something fun, but not me. I'm going to board a ship and go far away from home. I recall this Cajun band playing dockside while we boarded the Del Norte. I had never seen or heard anything quite like this. It was quite festive. I guess they were happy to see us leave. We first sailed to Houston, Texas, then onward to Santos, Brazil. It would take 2 weeks to get there. This picture of my mother depicts the sadness I felt as well as my beautiful country fades away. During the 2-week voyage, we socialized with other USAID families that would later become neighbors in our second home in Jardim Paulistano. I'm not complaining about the ship. The quarters felt like a motel room that rock and rolled. The sea breeze was cool. The pool, ice cold seawater. The pool water slushed back and forth with the roll of the ship. Dining was a welcome event. I found it very boring to be aboard ship. The dining area resembled a regular restaurant setting. Calm seas, outside barbecue, food, lots of food. I wasn't part of the formal affairs. I was seasick once. Fortunately, I was on deck with the wind direction just right. I dressed the side of the ship with my stomach contents. I remember being told that I was getting my sea legs. Passing through the Straits of Florida, the ship stopped and rescued 2 Cuban refugees. We had a King Neptune ceremony when we were crossing the equator. When you're crossing the equator aboard a ship, King Neptune owns a kangaroo court and sits in judgment of those who have not yet crossed the equator. We were called pollywogs, and we had to endure a series of physical trials at the hands of more experienced crewmates. Once the pollywogs prove themselves by surviving hazing, they are initiated into the kingdom of Neptune as shellbacks. We were given a certificate awarding us of all the rights and privileges due to a seasoned sailor. Here's a shot of Queen Neptune and King Neptune on their throne. The court convicted my brother and demanded surgery to straighten out his faults. It was kind of funny that they wanted to use a hammer on his head for surgery. Young pollywogs were blindfolded and made to eat fish eyes. Being all this hazing was in good fun, the fish eyes were warm, peeled grapes. It would hard to convince me otherwise. We were then initiated into the kingdom of Neptune as shellbacks. We made a few stops along the way. One stop before arriving at Santos was Rio. We hired a cab to take us to the Corcovado to see the statue of Christ the Redeemer. The driver was from New York. The voyage and visits to South America ports felt like vacations in the past. The Del Norte remained my anchor to the USA. I remained internally petrified. We ascended the Corcovado, having lunch on the way. Here's a shot looking down from the platform of the statue, the Redeemer of Christ. It shows the Del Norte waiting in the bay. About a year later, friends from the States paid a visit to us. We took them to Rio. The view on this slide shows the Sugarloaf Mountain. The Sugarloaf is almost 1,300 feet high. You could get to the top by cable car. My father made me go with our guests to the top of the mountain. Now I'm 10 years old. I've been to the Grand Canyon, and now I'm at the top of a mountain in Rio. Impressed? Not me. I wanted to go home, and I knew I could not. Early the next morning after Rio, we arrived Santos, our stop. We offload the car. Here's a shot of the Chevy's final home. She never came back to the States. She was sold when we left 2 years later. Whatever happened to it remains unknown. Our baggage was offloaded. We sat during customs clearance. We were picked up by another USAID employee in Santos and delivered to Brooklyn, suburb of Sao Paulo. Within 2 weeks, my world went from my hometown below to my new home as pictured on the right. It's hard to explain from a 10-year-old's point of view. Leaving a beautiful northern Ohio suburb full of friends, dead-end street, only to be taken to another country, put behind tall walls, The walls were encrusted with broken glass and a gate. There were no kids that I could see, and even if I did, I couldn't speak with them. I recall being isolated in this compound. This is the end of part 1. Please like and subscribe. Part 2 and subsequent parts are sure to follow.